Hey. There is nobody more surprised to have me up here than me. So, good evening. First, thank you to the extraordinary trustees, the wonderful people here at Niagara University who have made me feel unbelievably welcome this evening. It is truly an honor to be with all of you and with all of you, so thank you very much. You did it! Come on! Congratulations! Man, all the worry, all the stress, all the sacrifice, all the debt, you did it, you're here. That is not something that I take for granted, by the way. I speak to you tonight from a place of extraordinary humility. I am in many ways not at all qualified to be on a stage at a convocation. I am not a college graduate. The years that you have put into your education are something that I deeply respect and I deeply admire. You outlasted me by basically, if you came back after winter break of your freshman year, you shot past me. I left the University of North Texas having amassed not one transferable credit, a broken heart, two lifelong friends, the ire of every Greek organization on campus because along with my roommate, we went and stole all of the information packets and duct taped them together and turned them into a giant slide. I left with what I was told was not an insignificant amount of attention from the local constabulary and a formal invitation, not accepted, from a hippie sex cult to be their light board operator for their touring jam band, which prominently featured a didgeridoo because of course it did. And I also have a very vague memory, which has been subsequently verified, of smoking a preposterously large joint with Willie Nelson. And please remember, this was 1995, okay? So it was like really illegal. So all of you that are sitting out there right now watching all of this through the technicolor wonder of your legal edibles, you're welcome. Some of us crawled so that you can fly. I feel like now would be a really good time to acknowledge my parents. A 0.4 GPA, not a 4.0. 0.4 GPA. Hey, but I'm wearing the hat, right? Life is crazy. I'm glad that we could share some laughs about that. I'm not sure my parents could. Certainly not at the time. I also left college with the first flames of what would become a significant battle with addiction. That's it, okay? That's the sum total of my college achievements. That's not exactly the foundation for a life in which anybody would be honored for anything, let alone be honored with a doctorate from such an extraordinary institution. As amusing as that part of my life is, and let's be clear, it was pretty amusing, it started to unravel pretty quickly after that. Maybe not so much on the outside. You know, I was able to fake it for a long time, but on the inside, spiritually, I was evaporating. Most people who met me during the decade or so that followed me leaving college would have consistently described me with one word: angry. I was that most boring of creatures the angry young man. I was regularly in places and with people and in circumstances in which I could not see or recognize or even remember myself. The result was a deep, deep selfishness and a disconnection from the world. See, the life of an addict is a life of secrecy and lies and overwhelming regret as you attempt to maintain outward appearances, even as you watch your own soul, the parts of yourself that you know and that you like, slip dimly from your eyes if you ever dare look at yourself in the mirror, which you almost certainly do not. It is a lonely, lonely place. Eventually, with the help of people, 2 of whom are here, my parents, most of whom are not, I was able to begin to wake up from that nightmare, and I was able to put myself back together a little bit at a time. Now, things don't turn around on a dime, right? I was a mess. I continued to make more than my fair share of mistakes. I have failed horribly at every job I have ever had, from janitor to dishwasher to line cook to, God help, the restaurants that made me a waiter. I have put in well over the 10,000 hours, magical 10,000 hours of dedicated work on being an actor, and I have never once done it right. I have failed spectacularly at that too. But that's the beauty and the horror of art, right? So, the great Jim Harrison once said, and I'm paraphrasing a little here, I am tired of irony. I would rather give full vent to all human loves and disappointments and take a chance on being corny than to die a smartass. And it is from my deep connection to that sentiment that I want to talk to you today. I would not be standing here today. I would not be alive today if it were not for love. And this is my pitch to you, and the thing that I have learned over and over and over again in all of the places that my life has taken me while and since I cleaned up. From backstage of Broadway to Hollywood studio lots to palaces to refugee camps, homeless shelters, and active war zones. Love is not something that you feel. Love is what you do. About 15 years ago, large parts of that calcified selfishness that I had developed slowly started to drop off of my heart, and I began to hear my real voice again, and it was guiding me to make myself whole. And I was told that the way that you do that is by being of service. So I began to work closely with a number of humanitarian organizations. I was volunteering, I was advocating, and ultimately I was drawn to organizations that work with women and children who live with and who have been brutalized by war and conflict. Now, I'm not a medical doctor, obviously, but my career in the arts has taught me to be an unapologetically apolitical listener and a reliable narrator. So, at the urging of some truly heroic frontline humanitarian workers, I began to travel with them and work with them. And it is in this part of my life, specifically in my work with War Child USA and with INARA in Yemen the past 2 years, that I have most clearly seen the reality and the results of love as an act. In the outskirts of Aden, Yemen, in a camp for internally displaced people, I met this beautifully irascible 12-year-old boy named Abdullah, who with his widower father and his 2 sisters had fled from airstrikes down to Aden looking for safety and opportunity, where they found neither. Abdullah's daily routine was to pick through the mounds of debris and garbage that are so prevalent in war zones in an attempt to find food or anything of value that might be bartered for a meal for him or his family. One day he came across a wooden munitions box that was unopened, buried deep in the rubble. Now, if full, the resale value of what was in there could literally provide food for weeks. Or it could be empty, and the continued slow and horrible decline into death by starvation that had gripped his family would continue. So, with that at stake, he unthinkingly took a rock, he hammered open the box, he set off the ordnance inside, it blew off his arm, part of his jaw, and absolutely riddled his body with shrapnel, a lot of which was still in there when we met that day. Miraculously, he survived. Today, he still digs the garbage because there's nothing else to do. Now, I sat with Abdullah and his father, a man who had the most profound trauma-related tremors and whose body was in complete decline because of starvation. I will never forget the permanent look of shock horror in that man's eyes. So the boy told us his story, and the old man took from his chest pocket a Ziploc bag and tremulously handed it to the doctor that I was sitting with. And inside the bag were pages upon pages of meticulous notes that had been taken in perfectly legible handwriting, notes that he had kept about his son's injury, his treatment, his recovery, and his needs. Love is stillness. It is the quieting of voices and demands and distractions and defenses and even the stilling of fears that close the doors of our minds and our hearts and our souls and turn us inward. In Sana'a, Yemen, the Houthi-controlled capital of Yemen, I met a young pediatrician. She was the first girl to be educated in her family's history. After unbelievable sacrifices made by her very poor family and years of simultaneously working a full-time job and attending medical school, she was going to sit for her pediatric exams, but then war broke out. The following year, because everyone's education had been postponed, a fragile calm had descended, and she returned to finish her exams to complete her dream. The day that she was going to sit for her exams again, the bombs started dropping. This time they were targeting schools. They were targeting museums and sports stadiums and government buildings. Everywhere she turned, she saw brutality. She saw maimed and murdered children, women, wounded soldiers, terrified innocents. She was told once again that the exams would be postponed, but she led her class in refusing to delay her exams because every day she saw that they needed doctors. So, every day, for 2 months, she found a new route to get to the medical school and complete her exams as airstrikes rained down and as terrible close-quarter fighting erupted in the streets. One night, she and her classmates were working in the hospital when fighting exploded all around them. It trapped them inside without any food or any guarantee that they would be able to survive. They stayed for days before it was finally safe to leave. And this is how and when she completed her medical exams. With the building shaking from the bombs being dropped around them and with the sounds of automatic gunfire echoing in her ears. Love is recognition. It is seeing the humanity in and knowing the suffering of others because you have made space for it within yourself, to see it, to hear it, to be present for it, and then with that knowledge on board, taking action after action after action to change it. And there are no small acts of love. They are all profound. This past October, in a particularly brutal part of Yemen, called Lahaj, I sat with a mother and a father and their 1-year-old daughter, Soraya. The family was absolutely skeletal. They were malnourished, and the baby would not survive the night. In the silence that surrounds the dead and the dying, even amidst the tumult of war and an active war zone, and especially in the presence of a child who is dying, which is something so horrifying and so unjust, there is only space for anger and love. As baby Soraya looked at me in some of her final moments, I knew only to sit and look back into her eyes with an open heart and to reach out my hand and take hold of her father. And he gripped it with all of his remaining strength. And we sat like that for some time. And we spent time afterwards walking through the brutal camp that they lived in, like this, hand in hand, speaking softly to each other in two different languages, with only our shared fatherhood to translate for us. Love is connection. It is the setting aside of all opinions and politics and differences, perceived or otherwise. It is the refusal to lose your sense of place and time. I am here. It is right now. And it is to reject the stories and the chatter and the lies that tell you that there is something in this world more important or more valuable or more worthwhile than we, each other. There is not. There is a force in this world that is constantly striving to make you abandon the other, whether it is through drugs or war or politics or bastardized versions of religion. It pushes you ever towards solipsism. It turns you inward, and it armors you with all of the trappings of selfishness, right? Anger, judgment, fear, boredom, comfort, injustice, inaction in the face of injustice, lack of perspective, contempt prior to investigation. All of these hold the me above the we, and that is not love. To act with love is not easy, nor will it be easy on you. Love will tear down your walls, it will challenge your mind, and it's going to break your heart. But remember that a broken heart does not stay broken. And a crack in the heart does not simply fuse itself back together. It is patched up with experience and wisdom, and that added material makes the heart bigger than it was before it was broken. Each time it cracks, it grows. In my work in war zones, I have seen the tragedy and I have seen the miracle of humanity. The miraculous has almost always come from a courageous heart, and the tragedy has almost always come from some kind of demand for comfort. Look, I am an utterly imperfect messenger. But as you take your place in this world, and you must take your place in this world, I humbly offer you what I have learned and what I continue to learn every day, in the hopes that you will take it and you will build something beautiful with it. And it is simply this: you have no greater purpose in this life than to take the extraordinary action to love each other. Be still, recognize, and connect. May you all live a life of the awakened heart. And may all of you, be free from suffering. Thank you for sharing your time and your moment with me today.